Welcome back to the Oscar Project Podcast, the show where I discuss Oscar-nominated films year by year. I am your host, Jonathan Eacherberg, and today I'm bringing you an interview with Jessica J. Rowlands, director of the short film Rise. Before I jump into the interview, please be sure to subscribe to the show in your podcast player so you can get all the newest episodes as soon as they are released. If you like the interview and want to hear more, please consider leaving a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Writer-director Jessica J. Rowlands is a two-time UCLA Screenwriting Award winner known for her emotionally resonant, action-infused coming-of-age stories, who spent her formative years in Zimbabwe and is deeply committed to amplifying Zimbabwean stories and voices globally. Rise marks Rowlands' directorial debut and the culmination of a 3-year collaborative journey with local Zimbabwean artists and communities, and she joins me on the podcast today to talk about the film. Jessica, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So the credit at the end of the film says that this is based on the true story of Tobias Mapfuti. Hope I'm saying that correctly. Tell me a bit about where you first learned about him and why you felt you had to turn his story into a film.
Yeah, so my parents moved to Zimbabwe before I was born. So I, as you mentioned, I spent my formative years there, and I still split my time between London and Zimbabwe. And it's a place I've always wanted to capture on film. I think some of us have that feeling. If you had a nice childhood, the magic and nostalgia you have for the place that you grew up in, I don't know if you can relate, but I certainly have that with Zim. So the way the light falls, the smells, the sounds, the birds, the leaves, it's got a real allure and romance for me, and so many associated memories. And so, yeah, I really wanted to capture that. And I met Tobias. He's lives in the community where I live in Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe. And he's just such an incredible person. And I met him and heard his story and was utterly captivated. He grew up on the streets in Zimbabwe. He's dealt with a lot of abandonment and had a really troubled upbringing. And it was actually through boxing. He learned about boxing from an older brother, and that kind of gave him a structure and a routine and something to kind of hang on to that guided him through adolescence. And he never really found that mentor figure that he was looking for, so he became it. And essentially today he runs a boxing gym in town, and the membership fees are used to support a number of local underprivileged children that live with him. So Tobias is basically a surrogate father to about 30 kids in our community. And he pays their school fees, obviously trains them boxing, but also raises them. And much like in my film, the relationship that he has with Rise, he is that person for these children. So yeah, it felt like the perfect story to tell. And it felt really important. And I really wanted to capture it in that place and bring it to the screen and share it with the world.
Yeah, and obviously you already touched on it a little bit, but why was it so important to shoot this story in Zimbabwe with a local crew?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as I said, the Zimbabwe's in the DNA of the film, so I just couldn't have shot it anywhere else, I think. And I think when we used a local Zimbabwean crew because I wanted the film to be made by people that live, breathe, and love Zimbabwe and can understand the emotional truth of the story that we were telling and really, really understood it emotionally. And that's exactly what we got. We had an incredible crew that really connected with the story. And also the other side of it is making films in Africa or in developing countries. I'm sure there are similar challenges. It's different than making them in the West where there's infrastructure. And so having a Zimbabwean crew that are used to doing things in a makeshift way, or we have a phrase in Zimbabwe, make a plan. A crew that's used to just making a plan when something goes wrong, and you have to be used to tying things together with a shoestring or throwing on some duct tape and carrying on. And our crew is amazing at that. And that is very necessary when you make a film in the environment that we did. So yeah, I'm really grateful for our crew, and hopefully that's reflected, the authenticity is reflected in the end product.
Yeah, I definitely think it does come through on the screen. Now you have a fantastic young star of the film who plays the kind of the main character, Rise. He absolutely lights up every frame that we see him in. Tell me a bit about the process of finding such a young boy to play that character when he kind of has to lead the entire film with very little experience, I would imagine.
Yeah, I could talk about Sikhanyiso for hours. The boy who played Rise is called Sikhanyiso, or Scar for short. And we found him. So I had my heart set on finding local talent. I wanted to find a local child to play the role and not a trained actor from abroad. So I embarked upon this audition process across the country. We auditioned hundreds of kids. It was an incredible experience. We partnered with a lot of primary schools and in lots of different communities. And we actually focused on the part of Zimbabwe where Tobias is from. And we focused on going to rural areas and hard to access areas that had an emotional importance to Tobias and to the story rather than going to the major cities. So, yeah, it was quite an adventure, the audition process. But we actually found Scar so 100 meters down the road from where Tobias lives. He actually lives in the township that Tobias is from. And yeah, his front door, you can almost see his front door from the gates of Tobias's gym. And so I found him on the first day. He was standing in the front of the line on the first day of auditions, which we did at the local township school because I wanted to start right next to home. And he was standing in front of the line with his arms folded and a real like look of attitude on his face. I can't describe it. And he had these high top trainers on and he was tiny, about half the size of the other kids that were his age. And I turned to my producer Joe and I was like, that's my boy. And Joe was like, Jess, we've got we've got like this whole audition trip planned. You haven't seen him act. Like, let's at least get in the room before you cast him. And I was like, my heart just leapt out my chest and landed on his head. And of course, we went into the audition. We auditioned him a number of times. We went all over the country. And I found a lot of really talented kids. But I think, at least for me in casting, there's a lot of intuition and gut. And yeah, I just utterly connected with him from the moment I saw him because he was Rise. He was the character that had been walking around in my head for years, was standing in front of me. And I just knew I had to find a way to get him on screen, which was a whole process in itself because, as you can imagine, he was Rise and Rise is a very cheeky character. So we dealt with a really fun kid, but I wouldn't have changed it for the world. And he's absolutely fantastic.
That's awesome. I also want to touch on, I'm hoping I'm going to say this one as well, Tongai Karisa, who plays the mentor character. He's appeared in Mayfair Witches, Transformers: Rise of the Beast, so he's been obviously a little bit more experienced than your younger star. What was it like working with him to bring that mentor character to life in such a really warm and caring way?
Yeah, Tongai Teresa is a brilliant actor and collaborator. I already knew who he was. All Zimbabweans know who he is from his days on South African TV shows. And he was in a very dear film called Mr. Bones that Zimbabweans love. It's a great comedy film. So he's a well-known face. And I just thought that he would be an amazing asset to the project. And I love his work. So it was actually 2 years, maybe a year and a half before we shot the film. I was in LA for work and I just, on a wing and a prayer, sent him an email about the project and he replied and we ended up getting lunch in LA. I've never been so nervous in my life. It was like meeting Beyonce, but he was very nice and we became fast friends actually, and he was super supportive. And he actually hadn't shot a film in Zimbabwe or anything in Zimbabwe for 15 years. He's based in Hollywood, and so it was a real honor that he chose this project to come back to Zimbabwe on. And it was, yeah, so it was amazing. And Zimbabwe was so excited to have him back. And we actually, so yeah, I flew him out. We flew out to Zim and he met Tobias about 6 months before the shoot because I thought it was really important that they met and that Tongai had a chance to spend some time with Tobias and really understand what he was getting into. I mean, it's a huge responsibility playing a real life person that's still walking around in the world and living and breathing. And so those two got on great. And I think that was really helpful pre-production trip. And then, yeah, Tongai and I were talking about the character for over a year. And I think he played Tobias beautifully and really captured something in his spirit and in his essence that I'm really, really proud of.
Yeah. Now, I want to touch a little bit on the music of the film. I thought it was really great throughout. It had some good variety in the various different scenes. How important was it to get the right music to accompany this visual world that you were creating with the characters?
I'm so happy you asked about that and that you noticed because I spent so long on the music and score and sound design. It was an a really interesting formative process for me, actually, doing the music for this film. I think sound is such an important part of any experience, and I wanted to get amazing Zimbabwean artists on the score. So we licensed some great music from some great artists that I think is wonderful in the film. And we also got original vocals recorded by two Zimbabwean vocalists that are fantastic, Hope Masike and Nash from Flying Bantu, a band called Flying Bantu. And both of them represent different parts of Zimbabwe and different sensibilities. And they were kind enough to, record original vocals in local languages that reflect the themes of the film. And then all of this was brought together in a fantastic score by Max Udall. And the sounds and music were such an important part. I'm really pleased that you picked up on it. And I think that the Zimbabweanness of the film lives in the music and score too.
Yeah, I think I definitely felt that. It was very of the place when I was watching it and listening to the music. I also think, speaking of the place, I think your film has some of the most diverse settings and locations that were used to shoot in of any short film I've seen in quite some time. A lot of times there are single setting or one or two settings. What sort of challenges did this pose, having all of these various settings? You've got the train, the dump area. What sort of challenges did that pose for the production?
Yeah, it was very challenging, actually, come to think of it. I can give a few examples. The train, so there were no moving trains in Zimbabwe when we went to shoot because they'd stopped during COVID and for some reason they hadn't started again. So, but I said to Joe, the producer, I need the train to move. I don't want to fake it. So Joe miraculously managed to get us a moving train through a lot of trials and tribulations, but we did a 22-hour bus journey with the whole crew to get there just to shoot that. And so that was an adventure in itself, that bus ride through Zim. And there were other locations. I mean, the dump site, it turns out it's not that nice to shoot on a dump site. I didn't really think that through before, but standing on a dump site for a lot of hours, and it's a live dump site, it stinks. There are birds and animals and baboons, very big baboons, who, side note, tend not to like women that much. So the baboons were, I had a bit of a barricade. My producer also worked as a baboon bodyguard. And again, this is why you need a Zimbabwean crew. None of us were seeing a baboon for the first time. But so there are a lot of challenges like that. One that I remember, one of my favorite memories from the shoot was there's a shot of Scar rise up a tree at night, and he's hugging the tree, and it's a wide shot with a dump site behind him. And we had to run up to get the shot. Obviously, we were losing the light, and that's exactly what we wanted to capture. So we got him safely up the tree, but it's a wide, so I needed everyone out of the frame. So everyone kind of checked he was okay and safe, and we all retreated up the hill to look down on him and to just sit there with their camera on sticks and to just capture the moment. But I was worrying about him, and we weren't using sound in the shot, so I could talk to him. So I was shouting down the valley to check if he was okay and just keep chatting to him. And I remember shouting down, "Scar, are you okay?" And he replies, "Yes." And I was like, "What are you thinking about?" And there was a long pause, and then he goes, "Apples." And all of us, there were about 40 people standing there watching, and we were in stitches laughing because his favorite thing in the world is apples. And I thought he was really channeling the emotion of Rise and the scene and the loss and all the drama of it. And in reality, he was just thinking about apples, which is wonderful and hilarious to me. So.
That's a really sweet story. I like that. Now, I have a couple of questions not specifically related to the film, but before I move on, is there anything else you want to touch on about Rise?
No, other than we're premiering at Tribeca in June. So the world premiere is in New York on the 8th of June, and we're also screening on the 14th and 15th. So if you're in New York listening, please come and support us. Yeah, and we're really, really excited. We're the first Zimbabwean film in the history of Tribeca, feature or short, to play there. So it should be a really special moment.
Wonderful. Well, this might be the hardest question I asked, but if you had to pick your top 3 films of all time, what would they be?
But yeah, this is really difficult, and I think it changes every day. But if I had to pick, I would say City of God, for sure. It's a Wonderful Life, and Billy Elliot. I feel like those 3 represent 3 different parts of me.
Very nice. Yeah, I think City of God is actually one of the most recommended when I asked that question.
Oh, really?
It's a good pick. If you could invite any 3 movie characters to your next dinner party, who would they be and why?
This one I really struggle with. I think, okay, it's a fun question. I'm not going to overthink it. Let's say Red from Shawshank Redemption for a bit of wisdom. I think he'd be a fascinating person to talk to. The Dude from The Big Lebowski, because life's too short not to have fun. And Furiosa from Mad Max, because I'd want to make friends with her and go on an adventure.
Oh, that's an awesome group. And do you have any books you could recommend that you've read recently or really enjoy that could be fiction or nonfiction and don't necessarily have to relate to movies?
I would recommend, there's an amazing Zimbabwean writer called Petina Gappah, and she has some fantastic books that I adore, a few of which are Rotten Row, An Elegy for Easterly, and The Book of Memory. Those are 3 of her books, and she's just a phenomenal writer and really captures the essence of Zim in her writing. So yeah, I really recommend those.
I have not had anybody recommend anything from Zimbabwe before, so that'll be a first as well. And who else from the world of film should I have on the podcast?
From the world of film, I would recommend the producer of my film, Joe Njagu. He's an amazing filmmaker in his own right and has made a number of films in Zimbabwe, and I think he'd be a fantastic guest to have on.
Wonderful. We'll have to get him on. And lastly, before we wrap up, do you have any other projects lined up? I know you said you're just premiering this film at Tribeca in New York, but also where can people follow you on social media as well?
Yeah, I just finished writing a feature film script for an Oscar-winning producer, not set in Africa, but it's inspired by a true story coming of age film, which is kind of my thing. And so that's very exciting. And then I really want to turn Rise into a feature. So I'm currently developing the script for that. And then I've got a number of other projects in development that I'm really, really excited about. So yeah, you can follow me on social media. My Instagram is Jessie J Rowlands, Jessie with an IE. And the film's Instagram is rise.zimbabwe. And yeah, I'd love to have connect with people.
Wonderful. Well, we'll put some links to those in the show notes. And Jessica, thank you so much for the time today. Thank you for sharing your film. Really appreciated getting to see it and hope that the premiere goes well in just a couple of weeks.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you again to my guest today, Jessica J. Rowlands. Her film Rise is set to have its premiere on June 8th at Tribeca, with additional showings on June 14th and 15th. The Oscar Project podcast is written and produced by me, Jonathan Eaterberg, with editing assistance from Joshua Eaterberg. If you want more movie coverage, check out the Oscar Project online at theoscarproject.substack.com. I'll be back on Friday with Joanne Thornborough to discuss the 1928 film In Old Arizona. And next Tuesday, I'll have an interview with Sarah Gerke, creator of the web series Forked. Until then, I hope to see you at the movies.